Sam persuaded Canadian authorities to allow 1,200 European Jewish orphans to enter Canada and to settle 200 Jewish refugees on farms in Quebec.
He took over Congress, which was in a state of utter disrepair, and he turned it into perhaps the most professional ethnic organization, perhaps the best lobbying group in the country.
But his lobbying activities did not distract Sam from his true love, business. Seagram continued to prosper during World War II, and by its end, the company owned 14 distilleries, 60 warehouses, 10 bottling plants, and produced over 10 million cases of whiskey per year. Seagram had also added wines, and in the 50s, Sam would create the crown jewel of his brands.
He put together what we now call Chivas Regal, which immediately became a premium quality Scotch whiskey. It was marketed with consummate skill, and it quickly gained significant share of the market.
It was no coincidence that so many of Sam's brands had names like Regal, Royal, or Crown. Sam's love of all things Regal showed up even in the life he created with his wife Sadie in Montreal.
Sam's family lived like royalty in Oakland, at least superficially. I mean, the family photographs are posed by the best photographers, and the children are dressed as would English children, let's say, of high standing socially.
Sam and Sadie had 4 children, girls Minda and Phyllis, and boys Edgar and Charles. Phyllis was like her father in talent and temperament. Those traits emerged in full force when Sam invited her to help him supervise the office building he was erecting in New York.
New York City is the business capital of North America. After Prohibition and after World War II especially, he understood that the great growth market for Seagram's was the United States.
An avid disciple of modern art and design, Phyllis chose the building's architect, Mies van der Rohe.
Phyllis took a very strong role in insisting that quality of architecture and materials be emphasized.
The result was a stunning achievement of modern architecture.
It's a proud, soaring tower without any buildings round it, and it's unique in having this plaza around it. The greatest single legacy of the family is the Seagram building, one of the most handsome and iconic buildings in New York.
Phyllis's gifts were obvious, but Sam was too tradition-bound to consider giving her a major role at Seagram. That job would go to his son. Charles, the eldest, seemed too gentle. So Sam focused his hopes on Edgar.
He was his father's favorite, a very aggressive, dominant personality. His brother Charles, more reticent, a bit shy, happy to be the number 2.
Charles was very subdued, and it was clear from day one that Edgar was crown prince.
Sam apprenticed Edgar to become head of Seagram, but the father was as tyrannical to his son as he was with his other employees. Edgar struggled to assert himself. By the time it was Edgar's turn to run Seagram, he'd face a business world unlike the one Mr. Sam had conquered. He'd have to scramble to preserve the Seagram empire. His choices would take Seagram in surprising new directions. By the end of World War II, Sam Bronfman had built Seagram into a liquor industry colossus, a shining titan of Canadian business. Its chief product, whiskey, was one of Canada's biggest. But by the late 1950s, whiskey's popularity was waning.
Brown goods, which would be rye, bourbon, Scotch, were beginning to decline in popularity in favor of so-called white goods, which is gin, vodka, and white rum. And Seagram was very slow to get into those businesses.
As whiskey drinkers switched to gin or even wine coolers, Seagram ceded its market edge. And as Seagram's business slowed, its aging patriarch was showing signs of slowing as well. At the age of 68, Sam reluctantly began to yield responsibility to his sons, Edgar and Charles. He gave Edgar, his chosen heir, the biggest piece of the pie.
Edgar first took charge of the American operations. Charles was very happy with the much smaller Canadian operation.
Sam was an unrelenting boss, however. Edgar had to justify every decision to his ever-critical father. The two men did work together to boost Seagram's white goods business.
Give me 2 bottles of gin. My husband likes a good martini.
What kind would you like?
Seagram.
Okay.
Seagram's.
They bought the wine distributor Barton and Gestier and the champagne brands Perrier Jouet and Heidsieck. The acquisition of Myers Rum, Ron Rico, and Captain Morgan's spiced rum gave the company a Caribbean flavor. Although adept at distilling profits, Edgar did not share his father's single-minded obsession for the liquor business. He had other interests and pressed his father to diversify.
They did invest in MGM during the 70s because I think Edgar was intrigued by show business. He invested in various films.
By 1970, the Seagram star was again on the rise. Edgar was cementing his position at the helm of the family business, and Sam couldn't supervise his son forever. His health was failing, and it was clear he couldn't go on much longer. The following year, he died of prostate cancer at the age of 82, leaving a hole in Seagram's world.
I just remember the call from my uncle describing, watching this diminutive figure being taken out of the house and the sense of some aura, almost as if an emperor or a king had died, where at one moment the emperor fills the room, the aura fills the room, and the next minute it's a small dead body.
Shortly after he buried his father, Edgar divorced his wife and began a series of affairs with women that put him in the gossip columns. He romanced English actress Sue Lloyd, then married another woman he abruptly divorced.
He had an unhappy second marriage which lasted about 10 days, an English aristocratic lady, Lady Caroline Townsend.
Then, on August 8, 1975, days before his third wedding, Edgar came face to face with a rich father's worst fear. Kidnappers seized his 23-year-old son Sam as he was parking his car at his mother's house in Purchase, New York. They claimed they had buried him underground and demanded $4.6 million. The FBI assigned 500 agents to the case, and Edgar frantically bundled cash into plastic bags. But the puzzle had many pieces that did not fit.
It was a weird business because he somehow was supposed to be connected with the IRA.
One kidnapper apparently got cold feet and tipped off the FBI, and young Sam was released unharmed.
When he emerged from the kidnapping, he looked as fresh and clean as he did when he went in. And some people said it was simply Sam trying to draw his father's attention to himself, that he'd been a negligent father. It still remains a mystery to this day.
A few days after Sam's release, Edgar married Georgiana Webb, the third of his 4 wives. By the late 70s, Edgar's personal life seemed back on track, and he again focused on running Seagram. Edgar continued diversifying into other businesses. A series of maneuvers transformed a small stake in an oil company into a 25% share in DuPont. In the coming years, the chemical giant would contribute more than half of Seagram's earnings.
This was the great success story of Edgar from a business point of view.
Confident that Seagram was on solid footing, Edgar began indulging a new passion. Defiantly secular as a young man, in the 1980s, he rediscovered his Jewish roots.
Edgar sort of eased out of the business environment and devoted a large part of the rest of his life to anti-Semitism and became president of the Jewish World Congress.
His triumphs included exposing the role Austria's President Kurt Waldheim played in the deportation of Jews to Auschwitz. He also convinced Swiss banks to return funds to the heirs of those who perished in the Holocaust.
He was one of the major forces in getting a settlement of Jewish restitution of the assets that had been stolen during the war. It enabled Edgar, the success with the World Jewish Congress, enabled him to get away from the shadow of his father.
Edgar was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his activities with the WJC. For a man who had been so long in his father's shadow, the recognition for accomplishments purely his own was a sweet victory.
As chairman of Seagram, he was just Sam's son. But here, he was in charge of his own enterprise.
He earned the respect his father had so passionately sought and had been so thoroughly denied. Buoyed by his role with the World Jewish Congress, Edgar Sr. was ready to hand Seagram over to his son, Edgar Bronfman Jr. But Sr. intended to do things differently from his father. He wanted Jr. to have a free hand to run Seagram.
Edgar, his father, said, I don't want to treat my son as I was treated.
When Edgar Jr. stepped into the top job at Seagram, some would wonder if he had been given too much freedom. Without a backward glance, he would take the company so far from its base that its very survival would be at stake.